Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Continuing Stitches by A.G. Howard. 5. Burying the Hatchet. That night I stitched on Pa's final piece, but there was no pretending. I couldn't block out or forget that it was Ma's hand, but I could also never let Clover or Oakley know where it came from either. I understood on some level that Pa was innocent. He only wanted to give us back our Ma and give us a better life. He'd done that. He deserved to be complete and to never have any regrets. He also deserved to be perfect. All but one left ring finger amputated, just below the knuckle. As he slept off the sedative, and Clover and Oakley dreamed the simple dreams I would never have again, I tossed an axe into the back of Pa's Chevy and headed for town. When I passed Ma's tree, I could finally see why Pa thought something violent had happened there. The split no longer looked to me like a streak of white and auburn hair like it once did. It looked like a gash, an infected, pus-filled wound. The town looked different too, lonely and looming. All the stores and cafes that usually pulse with life stared back with dark windows, reflecting the truck's headlights. I took the same side road where I once caught sight of the collector's motorbike, turning and wove my way towards the outskirts of town, where the doctor was rumored to live. I hadn't let myself stop to think of how the collector was involved in all of this. Somewhere in my heart, I couldn't imagine he'd been behind Ma's death, but if he was, he would warrant the same ending as his employer. The 3-story house, large and dark, looked like a black, gaping maw in the moonlight. I parked the truck and wove my way through the hundreds of wrens pecking the ground. They didn't seem to notice or care that I was there. They just moved aside, busy with their routines. There were even more, some singing soft and haunting from the house's roof and eaves high above, and others flapping their wings in the oak trees that surrounded the estate. Spirit carriers. My fingers tightened on the axe's handle. They'd be happy tonight. Soon they would have someone new to whisk away. My climb up the creaky stairs seemed to take forever, stretched out even longer by my realization that the windows were boarded up. The hair on my arms bristled as the wrens grew quiet and still, as if watching when I came to the front door. It had been left ajar, and a flutter of yellow candlelight seeped out. I gulped hard and cinched my hand around the axe, prepared to swing without question. And then I pushed it open. The scent of cinnamon, vanilla, and something stale wafted over me. As my eyes focused on the flickering room, the air drained from my lungs. I was alone, but dioramas stretched from wall to wall on multi-tiered shelves. Little boxes with miniature, 3-dimensional scenes numbered and played out in still life. Instead of clothespin dolls to represent the people as one might expect, there were gingerbread men, boys and girls, all the ones I'd given the collector over the years. Their bodies were stiff and shellacked, tilted in place to play out strange, unsettling events. Gripping my axe, I walked closer to the diorama marked number 1, where a gingerbread girl stood on the roof of a building in a big city. Flames made of tissue paper spewed out from the windows. Diorama number 2 showed her in a pile of icing and crumbs on the sidewalk next to a burned-out building where she jumped to escape the inferno. In the next, a man in a doctor's coat, with a Bible in his hand, and a young boy in a modern grown-up suit stood at a grave. The one after showed the boy with his shirt off as the doctor pressed feathers into his skin. Miniature dead birds speckled the floor, and in scene 5, the man drove a black car up a familiar twisty mountain road, with the boy in the passenger side. A storm and lightning streaked the painted sky. Next, the car tilted on 2 tires as if losing control. Scene 7, the car crashed up against a tree. Sandwiched between the bumper and a tree trunk was a gingerbread girl with 2 white streaks in her reddish hair. Her top half tilted off kilter. She'd been split in half at the waist. Wooziness filled my head, but I couldn't stop staring. I stumbled along, my gaze trailing each diorama. The one where the doc had a gash in his head from the wreck as the boy drove him and the broken gingerbread girl back down the trail. The next, where the boy put my ma's dead body into the freezer and tried to stitch up the doctor who I now understood was his pa. When I came to the one where the boy sat across from a prisoner in jail and offered him a box, I knew. The night the collector visited Pa, he gave him her ring and explained what happened. That's what broke Pa. That's what changed him. As if to verify this, the next diorama was another contract where the collector offered Pa a way to fix our family, to save his hell-bent spirit and at the same time save his own Pa from going to prison. My Pa had been so drunk and heartbroken he waived his rights to take legal action for the doctor's involvement in the accident. My throat burned, as if it had been hornet stung from the inside. I didn't even have to see the next diorama where the collector was breaking off Ma's left foot, because every other scene that remained I had lived in as we stitched my Ma's pieces onto Pa. In the final diorama, the gingerbread boy in the suit sat in a chair by a bed where the doctor lay, hooked up to an IV and other machines. The painted background showed it was a room on the top floor of the house, the very house I stood in. The collector had been putting these scenes together since the day he first came to our house in preparation for me to come tonight. He wanted me here. Now to find out why. The axe's handle was slick in my palm as I squeezed it on my walk up the stairs. The unsettling flutter of wrens gathering in the eaves outside scattered my nerves. They were waiting, and I wondered if it might be my spirit they would be escorting away tonight. There were 5 rooms on the top floor, but only one was open at the end of the long hall. Candlelight streamed out, painting dancing shadows on the wooden floor and walls. When I stepped inside, the collector was right where I expected, seated next to his pa's bedside. My ears barely caught a sound of the beeping machines and the pumps filling the doctor with oxygen. I was too intent on his face. He looked younger than I'd have thought, a handsome man in spite of the fact that he'd been in a coma for 3 years. There was stubble on his chin and jaw as if his son had tried to keep him shaved but had given up recently. "Was it your ma who died?" I asked the collector, my pulse drumming below my jawline like a sledgehammer. He nodded under his mask. "And your pa? He heard about the bird folklore. He was trying to fix you so you could be a bird and fly to your ma. Be with her without dying." I looked at the doctor's arm where it was arranged atop the cover. "If it worked for you, he was going to fix himself, too. Am I right?" The collector looked down, flinching in the mask's eye holes. But I don't understand. There are birds everywhere on your lawn. You have enough feathers already. Why were you on my mountain that night?" He slipped off his mask. Candlelight flickered across him, his face a tragic mishmash of stitches and feathers. He didn't have any lips. They'd been removed and the skin sewn shut. I realized then what the extra IV in the room was for. It was how he'd been surviving. I couldn't move, so stunned by the scarred, twisted image. His pa must have gone to the mountain in search of a bird with a bigger beak, like the hawks Oakley watched through his binoculars. A bird with a beak big enough to sew on the collector's face in place of his mouth. I took a shaky breath and forced myself not to look away from the young man who'd been so kind to my family. Forced myself to see past the ugly, vile things that had been done to him through no fault of his own. "You tried to give me my ma back," I said, "in the only way you knew how. And you fixed my pa." He nodded. "What your pa did to you? It was wrong. Do you understand that?" He nodded again. "So I'm gonna kill him now. It's the only way to make things right." The moment I said it, the collector stood and worked off his mittens. All his fingers were stitched together, except his thumbs, as if to form a wingtip. Gray and black feathers sprouted where there should have been only skin. Slowly, he drew a knife from his jacket lapel. I tensed and raised the axe in self-defense, but he backed up and turned his mutilated hand over, laying the knife in his downy palm, a peace offering. It looked similar to a paring knife, the kind you used to peel skin from fruit while leaving it intact to make pretty embellishments for special desserts. Then I understood. He'd been keeping his pa alive just for this purpose, so he could become human again using his skin and limbs. Even if the collector's hands hadn't been damaged, he would have needed me. Not everyone has the ability to imagine themselves away. I'd had years of practice being Ma's fanciful girl and had perfected it through Pa's reformation. I set aside my axe and took the knife, squeezing the collector's feathery hand for comfort. "I'll fix you as good as new," I promised. With a somber nod, he left the room. In the flickering light, I took the doctor off his IV and the machines keeping him alive. Then, the moment his heart stopped, I slid the knife beneath the flesh at his ear, carefully cutting away his stubbled face while leaving it intact. I was no longer Sage Adams, quiet country girl with tears streaming her face, thinking of the jar of formaldehyde hidden in the garden shed with a finger afloat inside, worn with the dove-shaped imprint of a ring. Instead, I was a chef in a renowned restaurant, peeling the skin off of a kiwi for a gourmet fruit sorbet.